Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sean Giordano with TechXtend, and I'd like to welcome you to the webinar series, Maximizing Data Quality for Value and ROI. We're going to learn about active model templates today within ERwin 8.2. Before we begin, I'll just briefly cover an agenda, discuss who we are, and then I'll turn it over to Victor Rodriguez, our Senior Solutions Engineer, to discuss data management and data warehousing. Victor is our data management and data warehousing consultant, and he'll discuss active model templates within 8.2. We'll then have a questions and answer session and conclude with a summary. As you know, TechXtend, formerly Programmer's Paradise, has been in business for over 30 years as a leading source of developer and database tools. In addition to that, we also provide our customers with virtualization and cloud computing solutions, storage and data management solutions, business intelligence and information management, as well as mobile device management solutions. We also offer our customers a unique way to help them control their software and licensing costs, and we offer flexible payment options to our customers to leverage technology they need today and pay over time. Programmer's Paradise, or TechXtend, has formerly been, TechXtend has been a leading reseller of CA's data modeling tools for over 10 years now. We're an elite CA partner and a #1 data modeling reseller for CA. We have a dedicated CA sales and engineering team, and we have a database modeling and infrastructure design and training services offering that is unmatched in the industry. Our database worldview provides most of today's leading database technologies for our clients, and we can help you in design and modeling, management and administration, deployment and migration, performance monitoring and tuning, and reporting and data mining. Victor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sean. And thanks, everybody, for attending again. Many of you may have attended previously, and I think some of you, I'm pretty sure, have actually attended. I may have actually run into some of you attending now on some events that I've had in the past couple of weeks, which is like leaving some of the attendees are just walking out of the room here. So thanks for attending again, I should say. Today's topic, we're going to be covering a new functionality that just was launched with the ERwin 8.2 software. If you're currently ERwin 8 users, or this is a reason to think about upgrading. And if you're using 7.x, there's a whole bunch of nice features in 8.0 and beyond that you can take advantage of. And I have a whole webinar series that you can check on other events, or I should say other sessions that I've given of these webinars that kind of cover a lot of the new features in 8.x. So please feel free to take advantage of that in the future as well if you haven't caught up with them at this time yet. So I just want to make sure I have control of the presentation, and I do. So our agenda for today, we're going to look at what are active model templates, what does that mean in the context of your day-to-day modeling and in the software itself, differences to previous templates, the active model template editor, so how do you actually invoke it, how do you actually walk through it, what do these different features and options mean, and then we'll have a demonstration of the functionality, as well as some kind of ideas as to how I think that this is going to be really powerfully used in your day-to-day processes currently. And then we'll have time for questions at the end, so feel free to enter those questions in the Q&A section there of the viewer you're looking at now, and we'll take those as they come in, or I should say take them at the end of the presentation. So ERwin, this is a slide that you've probably seen at, for the CA events and also for our webinar series here as well. But kind of ERwin's kind of trying to fit its niche there in this, the idea of like really broadening the audience to your data management needs. So of course, this is the need of data, or the understanding that data is a huge, or probably the most important corporate asset in this current economic climate, has kind of percolated up to the highest reaches of your company. And now there's all these different audiences that are really concerned and with what's that data quality, where is that data, where does it reside, how do we integrate this? So there's some new features in ERwin that have been included, or added, I should say, to kind of allow additional distribution of that information and collaboration with those other team members. And one of these is these model templates that we're going to be looking at today. So what is creating a model template really? What's the value proposition there? Well, one is that you want to create reusable objects that you can share across multiple diagrams. So there's two issues there. One is, how do you save time by creating a process where you actually have a collection of objects that are reusable across multiple diagrams? And then also, how do you make that process, lock that process in place, so you actually have a method where users can actually take advantage of that process that you place there, for distributing this information. Now, you may have in the past used one model as a template for another. This is something that's been available in ERwin for quite some time, but now this is the idea of an active model template. This is a way where models can automatically integrate certain objects across multiple diagrams by having this active interface between this model template and the models that are linked to it. So, of course, you're going to save you time. You're going to not have to reinvent the wheel. You may have many reusable objects. These objects can be domains. They could be model behavior, right? So maybe they're naming standard files that need to be attached to multiple models across the enterprise. Or maybe it's just a collection of your entire data dictionary in one place where all your domain definitions are, your entity definitions are, your UDPs are, and then users can actually build models on demand from those. And that's really where you want to have a template that allows them to not only kind of cherry pick the objects they need, but the level of integration that's going to exist between those models, and then put a method in place where that integration automatically occurs. So it's wizard driven, so we're going to see the wizards as the demonstration goes forward. I'll have some screenshots to introduce them first before we actually go into the ERwin software. But this is pretty straightforward. The wizards actually will allow users to assist them through the process of creating these or integrating these models across from the template to the target model. So active model templates, the difference there is this is the next generation of the traditional ERwin templates we've used in the past. One big differentiator is the fact that in the past, when you created a template file, you had to take a certain ERwin model and basically save it as a separate type of model, an ERwin_TMPL file, which was simply a template file. Now you can use with active model templates, these are simply .ERwin files. So there's two changes there. One is the fact that you're simply just saving the file without changing the file extension in any way. But more importantly is the fact that you can simply take any .ERwin file. It can be a live ERwin model that is being used and modified by users, and that .ERwin file simply becomes a template for another file, depending on what you do when you access that wizard and start making the integration of model properties. So how do we invoke this new functionality in ERwin? So there's a new editor option. Now this is within the 8.2 software, so if you're using 8.0 after this webinar, or if you currently have it up and running, you won't see this there. It's only there if you have upgraded to the 8.2 software. And this is available from the File, Model, Templates menu. And you'll see that there are 6 different options there, and they're listed there to the right. And I'm going to kind of go into them in more detail. So bind template, if you haven't actually bound any two models together, if you just simply have a new model that you're going to bind for the first time to another model, you actually will see the only option that's going to be available is the option to bind a model template. So when you actually invoke this editor, you have the bind model template editor comes up, and what you can see there is that you can specify what the template file is going to be. Simply browse out, like you would expect to for any file, browse out to any .ERwin file or .ERwin_TMPL for existing template files, and just simply browse to that location of that file. And then at that point, you have two different options. One is to load the entire contents of the table template, I should say, and that simply will bring the entire model exactly as is into your current blank model. Usually a blank model. It could be an existing model, and you're just bringing in additional objects, but usually you would do this with a blank model before you start adding additional items. Now that would be to bring everything over, but very rarely will we actually want to bring the entire contents of a model over as a template. So most of the time you're going to select this option to run the template wizard to select objects for synchronization. And if you do so, you have the next editor here that pops up. This is the model template synchronization wizard, which will be invoked at that point. And what you see here is a few different options. So by default, you'll see the overview tab here, I should say. And this overview tab will contain what metadata objects are available and what model objects. So meta model objects are your user-defined properties. So these are two different levels of the ERwin meta model. One is at the object level, this meta model object level, which is like UDPs. These are properties that are shared across multiple objects, for example, across all entities. And then at the model level, we have like a list of the actual entities and things like that. And then lastly is the settings tab, and settings tabs allows you to either ignore or include model level properties. I'll explain that in more detail as we go forward. I actually skipped the meta model tab here in this dialog. In this particular case, it's blank. If you don't have user-defined properties in your template file, it will also be blank. But if you have created user-defined properties, they'll be available there to pick and choose which you'd like to synchronize across your models. At the model level, you actually see all the objects that you've actually selected, or I should say all the objects that are available within the model. Now, by default, this could be a very, very large list that contains every single model level object. So it could be an enormous list you can imagine with all your models listed here. But you'll notice towards the top of this editor, there's an edit filter option, and we'll see that editor in more detail as we go forward as well. But that edit filter option actually allows us to create a filter of the object types which we want to do the integration on. So we can basically say entities, for example, or we can look at attributes, or we can look at domains, and we can pick and choose the type of object that we actually want to include. Once we create that filter file, we put the checkbox on to apply filter. We immediately filter down on that massive list of objects just down to the ones that you'd like to include. And then from there, we can pick and choose the behavior we want across those objects. So for example, we may end up with 20 different shared dimensions, and we can say, okay, well, we're going to synchronize 2 or 3 of them and keep the rest of them there for future usage if we choose to. And I'll show you that during the demonstration. Lastly, like I mentioned, settings. You can select to ignore synchronization of the root model objects. Now, these are the behavior that occurs at the model object. So for example, you can imagine that a template file might have a model property name, which simply says, you know, dimensions template or something like that. And you may not want to bring that over into your target model because this is going to be a unique model. So that's the type of thing you might want to filter out here. But you can include or ignore these root level objects from this point. So there's also model behavior that you might want to exclude, like as far as you know, default settings for whether it's your RI behavior or the fonts and colors as they're propagating throughout the model. So all these root level behavior can be ignored so it doesn't override the behavior in your target model. So this is the actual filter dialog that I mentioned before, and you see here that by default, everything within the diagram is available here, but we can filter with a lot of granularity. Do I want to include or ignore my defaults? Do I want to include my entity definitions, my domains? And it goes on and on. You can go have a lot of granularity down to the attribute level all the way down to any of those nested properties as well. So what are the other explanation as to other you know, behavior you can see here? Even if you have one bound template, you can still additionally bind yet another template after the fact. So you can do an additional template bind using this editor. You can refresh templates. So what does refresh template mean? Let's say that you have a model that's currently open, that's bound to an external file, and that file has changed. You either know it's changed or maybe it's just a very active model, so you know that oftentimes the object definitions are changing, maybe attributes have been added. By doing a refresh template, it will bring in all changes to those shared objects immediately. Unbinding, pretty straightforward, right? You've created your dimensions, for example, you're at a certain level of your software development cycle, and now you actually are going to go your own way. You want to now no longer have this bound relationship between the objects. You know, this is no longer a one-to-one synchronization across those objects. So you simply unbind. It invokes a very similar editor that we saw before, and you have granular unbinding. So it's not unbinding everything. You can actually go in there and selectively make changes to the behavior. Defining a filter, we saw a specific screenshot of a filter just a moment before. That simply means this is the list of objects that can be included or excluded as part of the synchronization process, and you can define that at any time. Synchronize on model load, I should say, that the synchronize on model load is listed here. And by default, this simply means that when I open the model, it will automatically synchronize. That is usually the behavior we want, but sometimes, once again, you may want to disable that. And if you do disable it, then you can do so. I do see that we just got a question come in from Joel. And the question is, does this work with the model manager or template must be on the file system? Joel, at this point, this is something that is only with standalone files, although this is being added, I would assume, probably within the next release, that this will work with the model manager as well. But at this point, these are only physical files. These are physical.erwin files. But like I said, this is something that is intended to be part of the model manager process in the future. So I would assume that would be relatively short order. We're going to see a change to that behavior. So I think I did cover, the only last thing I did not mention here on the list here of the items that are listed here. One is template information. So template information simply means that, you can invoke an editor that has basically a recap of everything that's occurred, and it also at a global level allows you to make changes. So you can change the defined filter, you can bind a template, you can do everything from one single editor. So it's simply template information shows you the current linkage from between this model and any templates that are attached to it, and also allows you to edit them as well. So that is the basic functionality. It's pretty straightforward. There's really not that much more to it, and we'll see during the demonstration that it's that the wizard kind of walks you through the process. So with that, let's get into the demonstration. And I apologize, I probably will not get to your questions if they come in during the demonstration, but I certainly will get to them afterwards. So I'm going to share my desktop now. Now, in this example here, there's no example yet, I should say. We have a blank model at this point. So let me start walking through this example. I'm just going to create a new model here, first of all. And in this example here, I'm actually going to create a new, let's create a Oracle database. And it's just a blank model that I'm starting with, but you can use an existing model, by the way, if it hasn't been bound to any objects before. And what I can do is I'm actually going to go to the model templates option, and I'm going to bind a template. So this is the same editor I mentioned before during the screenshots we saw during the early slideshow, that I can actually browse to a template file. And I've actually saved a few sample models here to play with. And one is I actually have this dimensions template file that I've created. And these, I believe, if I remember correctly, when I created it, these are just some dimensions from an SAP BW system, actually. So I can load the entire contents, which, of course, would just simply give me, this is just going to match the other model. So rather than doing that, let's actually run the template and have some granular inclusion or exclusion of objects. So I just select the option to run the template wizard, and I click OK. And you'll see I have no meta model objects, so this particular model has no UDPs, but I'll show you an example where there are UDPs in the next example. And I have 121 objects that are available for filtering. And then I see the behavior here, which ones are marked defer and ignore, etc. At this point, nothing's been done because I haven't actually done any filtering. Here, like I mentioned, the meta model level, I have no listed objects, as I expected to see. At the model level, I see that I'm only seeing my entities here. Now, by the way, the reason that I'm only seeing the entity objects here is because the properties for the last time that I filtered were stored. But if you're running this for the very first time, every single object type listed here, and you see there's a huge list of ERwin metadata, is checked on. And you'll see something like this. So you see this huge list of available objects. I see my indexes, my relationships, my entities, attributes, etc. But like I mentioned before, we probably don't want to see all of this. So normally when we get to this point, I would click on the Edit Filter option. I'm going to unselect everything at this point here, and I'm going to select the objects I want to integrate. So entity, by the way, even if it's a physical model, from ERwin's perspective, it's still an entity, even though it's really a table from the point of view of a physical model. But just so you know, that's the nomenclature, ERwin always sees them as entities. And columns are attributes. So ERwin always sees them as attributes, even if it's a physical-only model, because it's really we're really talking about ERwin metadata at this point rather than, your explicit metadata. I'm also going to look at domain objects. And I'm not even sure if this model has some, but there'll definitely be some in the next example that I'll show you. So I click OK. And I do see that I have some custom domains that I created here, and I also have the entities that I've included. So the notation for this particular model, dimensions have this D notation, and there's an F here to designate a fact. That's just a notation for my particular model, but you can imagine that, I've included a fact table here, by the way, just for to get some logic in the design in the original model, but of course these could be just a list of dimensions that are stored in a central model for reuse. So you see that by, now there's this apply filter checkbox. I turn my checkbox off, I see the full list of objects. I turn it back on again, and I see the filtered list. So pretty straightforward in how to create and edit the filter and then apply it as part of the model objects. So now you'll notice by default, all of the items are set to synchronize, right? So you can imagine if you had hundreds of objects here, this would be very difficult to go through and say, no, I want to ignore all of these, but you can simply select all of them, and we can do an ignore. So that's actually what I would suggest as a best practice. Actually begin by ignoring everything, so then we can actually cherry pick what we want to include. So what I actually want to include here, let's say I want to actually keep this custom integer, so I'm going to select to synchronize that. Let's see, we want these quantity key figures. I want to synchronize that one as well. This ID, I'm probably going to use that in multiple places, so I'll synchronize that one. And then I'm going to use some of my dimensions as well. So at customer, I want to include that. I want to include organization and product and time. And that's all I'm going to include for now. I'm going to click the Finish button. And these actually, you'll see that these actually contain the coordinates from the original design. But now that it's in a separate model, I can simply change the layout here so that they appear this way. I can actually change, and then you'll see also the display level here is just the primary key member, but I can change my display level here in this model to include, be either definition objects, or I should say the definition of the objects, or I can include my attribute display level. This is just entity display level, which doesn't show much at all, or my key display level, which contains just my key members, which is what we originally saw when this design was first imported. Let's go back to the attribute. Actually, that's primary key membership. Let's look at this one here. So this contains all of the attributes listed in the model. So pretty straightforward. I've created this now, and I can actually now come and create a fact table from these dimensions as part of my new design. But the key point here is that I haven't just simply, imported these dimensions. There are many ways where you could have done that. We could have just simply copied and pasted them between models. But the differentiator here is that now when these objects are actually changed in the source, in that template model, in the original template model, the next time I actually open this model up, especially since I have this synchronize on model open checkbox turned on, which would be my default behavior, although I can disable it. What this simply means is that if there are changes to either these object definitions, maybe attributes will be added in the future, maybe different properties will be modified in these objects, the next time that I open this up, there will be automatic synchronization. So there's no need for me to do a complete compare and make sure that my definitions are valid, make sure that all my attributes are have been included. Any changes to these dimensions in the source model will automatically propagate the next time I open this model, or at any time that even if I have this currently open, I can do a refresh template and automatically it will do that for me. So I can create some new fact here. And then begin to build my fact table from here, from my customer and product and time. And it's probably more information I need in here, but you can imagine the value of this is that you're actually using standard dimensions across multiple designs. So this is one example of how you can use this. There's many different ways you can use it, and I'll show you a couple of different other ones. But here's one, a pretty straightforward one, creating a repository of the standard dimensions that can be used across multiple new diagrams. Let's take a look at another way to use this. I'm going to create a new diagram here. Let's make this one a SQL Server model. And this time I'm actually going to use my model template. I'm going to bind a template. And I'm actually going to bind just something simple, something everybody's familiar with. I'm going to use the eMovies model. And I'm going to run the wizard once again. And I'm removing the apply filter checkbox to show you all of the available objects here. So for example, you'll notice that we have user-defined data types have been created. So we have an attribute owner, UDP, date created UDP, the color, creation date, data stewards, other UDPs that have been included here as well, at the model level. So we have the ability of including these or excluding them. Once again, I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to ignore the synchronization. And I'm going to actually just include a couple of these. So for example, I do care about the attribute owner. I do care about my data steward. Oh, I'm sorry, I did a defer, which I didn't mean to do. Attribute owner, synchronize, and data steward, synchronize. And I actually, know what? I haven't even mentioned what this defer means. So let me explain what that means. Ignore, of course, means that there simply is no synchronization across those objects. Pretty straightforward. Synchronize means that those objects will be synchronized. The defer, what that means is that you are not going to synchronize now, but the next time the model loads, for example, or any time that there's a refresh, there will be a synchronization. So you're deferring it just for one time, but then you can actually do a synchronization in the future. So this is, of course, the meta model. This is something we haven't looked at in much detail before, but these are like user-defined properties. If I go to my list of model level objects, you'll see that now, because I have not applied a filter, I have everything listed here: attributes, model properties, relationship lines, everything. So I'm actually going to go and edit my filter list here. I want to filter down on what I'm going to include. I want the domains this time. And I want some model properties. Rather than worried about the entities and things like that, now I actually want to include shapes that I've created in the model. I want to include themes that I've defined previously. And you can imagine you may have custom trigger templates, for example, and even like storage properties for that you've defined for Oracle and things like that. So you have different modeling properties that you may want to include in this particular case. So I'm going to filter down on these. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to apply that filter, and you're going to see that we have much less information here. So we have shapes that we've created. We have a theme that's custom to this particular diagram. And then, of course, we have domains that we've included, for example, related to address, related to different properties within the model itself. So once again, you'll see by default, everything is selected as synchronized. I'm actually going to select everything. I'm going to ignore them all. And I'm going to then selectively include objects as I see fit. So my city is going to be synchronized. First name and last name will be synchronized. Phone number will be synchronized. State, zip code. And I want to bring in these different shape items and the theme as well. By the way, of course, you can selectively grab a group of items as well, and then either synchronize, ignore, defer, etc., based on that as well. Just like I showed you, you can do a group to ignore it once. You can obviously select them to synchronize as well. Settings, once again, I'm going to ignore the synchronization of the root model objects. If you turn this on, like I mentioned before, model properties will actually come over. So if you have certain settings that you've defined at the model level, you will actually automatically bring them across into your new design. By default, I don't actually want that, and most of the time you probably won't. So we'll turn that off at this point. And we'll finish. Oh, we're getting a GDM error. Not sure where this is coming from, but oh, we had ERwin crash on us there. Hopefully that wasn't related to that editor there, but we'll try again in this next pass. And I'm not sure if it was because I was using that eMovies model, which in my experience is really not a great model to use for these demos, but because it's been converted God knows how many times at this point from all those different versions of ERwin. Let's try that again with the same tempting fate here by using the same model, but let's see how it goes. So I'm curious to see. Let's see if I actually, well, no, I would still create the UDPs. I was thinking that there might be an issue here with adding the UDPs before creating the objects, but I don't think that would matter. So let's try it anyway. I'm going to apply the same filter, by the way. It remembers my previous settings. So let me include let me select all of these, and I'm going to ignore them all. See how this goes this time. Oh, could be the same issue. So it looks like it might be something to do with that model. So I boot up ERwin again. Let me see if we have any other questions here. And we do have a new question. So the question is about the description of a canonical model for application source models. And the question is, am I suggesting that the enterprise entities that are static should be kept in templates? And I say yes, that is exactly what kind of the usage would be in that particular instance. As far as building that canonical model for that reuse across multiple diagrams, that would be exactly the suggestion that I was indicating in that, that email that I sent out with the description of the webinar. That is actually one of the usages that I would suggest. So, so the one example I was trying to show, unfortunately, that eMovies model is probably not the best model to be using, and hopefully I'll have a moment here when this gets up and running again. I'll show you with one of the test models that I created previously. But so straightforward. Obviously, let's take a look at where we want to use templates. So at a very high level, I have naming standard files, behavior, and themes, let's say, right? So I've defined certain themes. I want my foreign keys to migrate with a particular behavior. I want to use a particular font and color. I want to embed certain images as background images in my subject areas. I have a subset of subject areas that I use over and over again in my for maybe I have a subject area for the BI team where we contain those dimensions that they need to run the report on. Then we have other subject areas that contain other subsets of some of the same information we're looking at. So we actually have these different tables for different audience type of thing, and we may have those that were built over and over and over again. So anything that we need to build in the model repeatedly, maybe custom trigger bodies, maybe stored procedures that we use over and over again, function bodies, domains, obviously. But not only that, naming standard files, right? So how many times do you actually migrate a naming standard file from one location to another, or you actually revised it, and you have to tell everybody to go and update that naming standard file? If you're not using the model manager, and it's all pointing to one central file, which obviously is updating, then there's no real convenient way of, propagating that out to all the models that are linked to it. This actually allows you to do it simply by linking that model behavior to the other models, then updating the models will automatically synchronize. So that's one option set, is how do one usage, I should say, is taking these model behaviors, model properties that we need to create over and over again against multiple models. So that's one usage. Another usage, like I mentioned before, is using the idea of having the a canonical model or something like that. So if you already have these static entities defined, these are the standard for the enterprise, then you can actually store them in a template. Not only can they be modified in a template if definitions change, any property changes occur there, you have a central model to update them in. But not only that, you can, with new projects, you can actually on demand select the objects you need from that central model, and then of course there is a live relationship between them. So updating it in that model will automatically propagate the changes out to the linked models. So that is the idea of creating them there. And then they have a question, is the movie model that I'm using, is that SQL Server? It is a SQL Server model. Is that, maybe you're suggesting that was what's causing the crash? Yeah, it is a SQL Server model as well. So I don't think that was the cause of the crash, but thank you for troubleshooting. So I will actually continue to take questions while so please feel free to ask any additional questions, and hopefully I'll have a couple minutes here at the end to run another demo once I have the software running with a model that seems to be behaving. So if you need to synchronize entities across 3 different models, would you need to create 2 different templates, for example, template A to sync model 1 to model 2, template B to sync model 2 to model 3? No, you do not need to create, like, you don't need to bridge the models all one to another. You can have one central repository of those shared objects, and then you can have 4 or 5 different models linked to it. So you can imagine, for example, for lack of a better term, imagine one logical model that contains those entity definitions, and then imagine 5 or 6 different physical implementations of that logical design. They can be different target databases, SQL Server, Oracle, etc. And they are all linked to that one central model. So the key takeaway from that is changes to the entities in the one logical model propagate throughout all of the linked models. So that is, a key point in, in creating that as well. So, so that's an answer to that question. So that would not be necessary. You can, however, link more than one template model to a particular model. So let's say you have a model that contains, your entity definitions in one particular model. You can actually have that linked, or I should say, you could have that as a active model template and create link another model to the same target model that may have like your domain definitions and things like that. Synchronization, however, can only occur one model at a time. So you might have to do 2 synchronizations to, bring in changes across 2 different models, if that makes sense. That might be a little confusing, but I hope in the future, actually, I'm hoping that multiple linked models can synchronize at one shot, because I think that's going to make it much more flexible. That's an enhancement request I put in, so hopefully it's something that happens. But you can add multiple models as a target. So it goes both ways, I should say. You can have one model that is your target model that is, has 2 or 3 or 4 active model templates where it's bringing in different linked objects, or vice versa. You can have one central model that actually has, for lack of a better terminology, 5 or 6 or 7 child models that are all sharing objects between that central model out to those satellite models as well. Okay, I'm going to actually go back and share my desktop again. And rather than using that old eMovies model, I'm actually going to try to use one of mine here. And let me create a new logical physical model. Actually, let me open one of these dimension models here. And my target database is SQL Server 2000, actually. So let me create a new logical physical model, SQL Server 2000. And once again, I'm going to invoke the model template. I'm going to bind a template. I'm going to browse out to that same data warehouse, that small dimensional model that I was just looking at. I'm going to run the template wizard. I'm going to apply my filter here, and you'll see that we have actual shapes here that I want to include potentially. I have themes that I've defined. Actually, first let me, once again, ignore all these, and then I'm actually going to include them here. I'm just going to include one of these themes that I've created in the model here. Let me edit filter again, and I'm going to actually include entities as well. You see the new added objects by default are all set to synchronize. I'm going to ignore that and then just select a couple, maybe just the inventory. Actually, include just a couple of dimensions, I should say. So there's a product and store and time. So it's kind of a similar example that I had before. I get the same error message. So now I'm wondering if this is actually related to those. Oh, it did work this time. Okay. I actually thought it was going to give us trouble again, but these are the drawing objects. So I actually was thinking that if there was a crash associated with this, it might have been related to including drawing objects, because I did include that last time as well. But in this case, it actually did not crash, luckily. So we've included the drawing objects here, so this is something you might want to embed in multiple objects. Of course, if you want to have these standard embedded objects in one diagram, you can bring them across. And then, of course, I've included these dimensions as well, so I can use them here as I build new facts from these. So this is actually a pretty similar example to what I showed before. So hopefully, some of the information, like talking through some of the other exercises, explains where other usage could come in as far as having, shared model behavior, having, shared domains, something that's very useful, user-defined properties, and other things of that nature as well. So that's pretty much all I was planning to show here. Hopefully, they'll iron out some of these kinks that we saw during this demonstration, and the model manager addition of adding this to Model Manager should be available in the next release, which should be forthcoming within a few weeks, actually. So, and hopefully the bug that we saw as well will be fixed there as well. So I also want to point out, so just kind of quick at the end of the presentation here, I want to include mention that if you haven't gone to erwin.com, I definitely recommend heading out that way. There's a lot of really useful information there. You have the ability of signing up for ERwin's webinars there. You have professional bloggers there that are talking all about data management needs, data modeling, just kind of emerging technology that and where it fits into your day-to-day processes as well. So so this is a really great resource here. There's a user community, so you can actually go there and share your ideas with other users and share your experiences with other users as well. So what are your next actions? If you are under current maintenance, I know a lot of users haven't actually installed ERwin 8, and so I'm just going to start making this kind of like my closing line on a lot of these webinars. But there's a lot of really nice features beginning with 8.0 and all the way up to the current releases. And many of you are paying maintenance but haven't actually installed the latest version of the software. So I'd actually say reach out to us or to erwin.com. Go out there. The software is available for download. And you can actually download the latest versions of ERwin as part of your maintenance. This is something you're paying for. You do not have to uninstall your 7.x release, but I think if you install 8.x and start playing around with it, you'll find that you're really going to find a lot of really useful information in there, functionality in there that you may want to start integrating into your day-to-day processes. So you can actually install the 8.x software. It doesn't share any components with 7.3 or 7.2 or any of the other releases. You can actually have them running concurrently, and then you can actually download that software, and then if you I should say that, and once you've installed the software, you can actually upgrade, open your 7.x models in 8.x, maybe do some work in 8.x, use some of the new features, and you could save it back to 7.x to share it with the rest of your team. So once again, it's part of your maintenance, so there's really no reason to hold off on at least installing it in a couple of environments just for testing purposes. If you listen to my previous webinar and you're interested about the concurrent licensing options in 8.2, feel free to reach out to me as well. Register for the portal evaluation. Once again, if you checked out my last webinar, I did a brief webinar, brief demonstration of the new portal technology in 8.2. So very exciting, and there's an evaluation that you can run that you don't even need to install the software. So if you're curious about learning more about that, feel free to contact us, and we'll send you the links to. It's just a web-based interface that allows you to test out and play with the web technology. So that's pretty fun stuff. So hopefully, if any of those things interest you, make sure to reach out to us. And you can contact me at, you can just do a Google search for Maximum Data Modeling, and you'll find my LinkedIn, Twitter, and my Blogspot blog posts as well, and reach out to me that way as well. We have a couple more questions coming in. Where can the previous webinars be found? Actually, when you exit out of this presentation, when this presentation ends, you'll actually be able to sign up for future webinars, and on that same link, you'll actually see recordings of all the previous sessions. So you can actually bookmark that page, or feel free, actually, we'll have someone contact you after the presentation, and we actually have just a URL that we can send you that has all of those webinars there. I have another question here as well. Where's the option where we can accept or reject synchronization or change coming into the model? Okay, so where can you actually accept or reject the synchronization of changes in the model? There's two options there. One is if you do select to automatically synchronize, it's the checkbox that we saw in the editor. It's the last option there in the list of menu items. You can actually go in there and let me actually share my desktop rather than talking through this. So one option, of course, is if it's desynchronized on model open is selected, you will automatically synchronize when you come in the next time you load the model. There's automatic synchronization. Simply by turning the checkbox off, you have disabled the automatic synchronization. So that's as straightforward as it gets. However, let's say that you actually are, synchronizing on model load. However, what you want to do is you either want to include or exclude additional objects for this integration. Then you can go to your template information list here, and you can actually do additional filtering at this point. So you see what's being synchronized in this particular list of items. And using the normal editors here, you can, modify the existing filtering there as well. So you can actually make modifications to the what is actually being included as part of the synchronization. So that's something you can do after the fact as well. So two options. One is a granular one. One is just a global uncheck to remove that synchronization. Okay, I'm going to go back into the slideshow here. And now we officially get to the question slide. So please feel free to ask me any other questions if they come in, and we'll just take a moment to let anybody type in any questions that may not have been answered yet, and then we'll be right back with you to take your questions.
All right, everybody, seeing no more questions, once again, Victor, thank you very much for today's webinar, and thank you, everybody, for attending. To contact us by email, info@techextend.com. In the U.S., by phone, 800-221-7710. For our Canadian friends, 888-423-2700. So, again, thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next month.